Throughout American history, the White House has stood as a symbol of power, democracy, and the heart of the executive branch. Its iconic structure, serving as both the residence and workplace of the President of the United States, has withstood numerous challenges, wars, and political upheavals. However, one particularly shocking moment in the history of the White House came not during an external conflict, but from within, when the actions of a president's party itself led to a destruction of sorts. This is the story of when a president's party effectively tore down the White House, politically, symbolically, and even physically. A monument to power, a target of controversy. The White House was not always as grand and ceremonial as it is today. It was, after all, a building like any other, constructed over several years from 1792 to 1800, designed by James Hoban, and located on the banks of the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. It was designed to reflect the ideals of a young republic, representing not just the executive power of the presidency, but the democratic principles of the nation. The first test for the White House came in 1814, during the War of 1812, when British forces set fire to the building. In this moment, it was not the actions of the president's party, but an external adversary that sought to destroy the White House. The burning of Washington was a symbolic moment for the young nation, but it wasn't the last time the White House would face destruction at the hands of political forces. The real story of internal destruction begins during the 19th and 20th centuries, when internal political conflicts, partisan divisions, and the actions of various presidential administrations led to shifts that drastically altered the physical and symbolic landscape of the White House. The era of political turmoil. One of the most infamous instances of a party destroying the White House occurred in the 19th century during the administration of Andrew Jackson. Jackson, a fiery populist and military leader, had become the 7th President of the United States in 1829. He was a man of the people, but his administration's actions, and the actions of his loyal supporters, did much to tear at the fabric of political norms in the country. Jackson's presidency was marked by fierce partisan battles and a highly charged political atmosphere. His Democratic Party, which had won a sweeping victory, engaged in an all-out battle with their Whig Party opponents. Jackson's stance on issues, such as the Second Bank of the United States and the controversial Indian Removal Act, further polarized the nation. But it was during his inauguration in 1829 that the first major example of how a president's party could tear apart the White House took place. The inauguration of Andrew Jackson was nothing short of chaotic. With Jackson's supporters flooding Washington for the event, the atmosphere turned into a political spectacle. The crowd that gathered to celebrate Jackson's victory was unruly, and what began as a celebration turned into a full-scale riot. When the celebration spilled into the White House, the chaos intensified. The partygoers stormed the White House in a boisterous display of triumph, and the building itself, then a relatively modest residence, was damaged. Glass windows were shattered, fine china was broken, and the president's residence was left in disarray. Jackson himself, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the scene, had to flee to the nearby estate of his friend, the famous abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison. This event, while not a literal destruction of the White House, marked a moment when the power of Jackson's party turned the residence of the nation's leader into a chaotic and unruly scene. Jackson's party and its supporters had dismantled the dignified nature of the White House itself, making it a symbol of populist disruption. The reconstruction of power. Despite this moment of disorder, the White House would later be reconstructed as a symbol of renewed strength. However, the damage done during Jackson's time in office was symbolic of the larger fracturing of American politics. It set the stage for future political divisions, including those seen in the Civil War and the battles between political factions in the Reconstruction era. However, it wasn't until the 20th century, with the rise of modern political machines and political partisanship, that a truly catastrophic form of destruction of the White House occurred. This time, through the actions and choices of a president's party that literally altered the building itself. The Watergate Scandal, a political destruction. The most famous example of a party destroying the White House came during the Watergate scandal under President Richard Nixon in the 1970s. Unlike previous incidents of political chaos, where political parties clashed or demonstrated their power, the Watergate scandal involved the illegal and secretive actions of Nixon's own party members and their efforts to secure his re-election through criminal means. In June 1972, 5 men working for the Nixon campaign broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters, located in the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. They wiretapped the phones, hoping to gather intelligence on the Democratic Party's campaign strategy. What followed was a cover-up that led all the way to the Oval Office. As the investigation unraveled, it became clear that Nixon's party, through its campaign staff, had engaged in illegal activities, including the break-in and subsequent attempts to conceal it. As the scandal escalated, the White House was thrust into turmoil. Nixon, in a desperate attempt to protect his presidency, was forced to use the power of his office to manipulate the investigation and suppress key evidence. His efforts to control the narrative, ultimately exposed through whistleblowers and journalists, unveiled a party leadership consumed by corruption and disregard for the principles of democracy. The destruction of the White House in this context was not physical in the traditional sense, but rather in its reputation and the very notion of what the institution represented. The actions of Nixon's party members and his attempt to cover up the scandal weakened the integrity of the presidency itself. As public trust eroded, Nixon was forced to resign in August 1974, marking the first time in American history that a sitting president had resigned in disgrace. The White House and the modern era, the Watergate scandal, and Nixon's resignation marked the beginning of a new era of political accountability and transparency. However, the damage done to the White House's image in the eyes of the American public left an indelible mark. The phrase Watergate would go on to symbolize political scandal for generations, and the consequences of Nixon's actions rippled through American politics for years. As the years passed, presidents from both parties would grapple with maintaining the dignity and trust associated with the office, but the history of the White House as a symbol of power and integrity would never quite be the same. Though the building itself remained standing, its structure largely untouched, its reputation had been tainted by scandal, deceit, and partisan chaos. The actions of Nixon's party and the subsequent unraveling of his administration served as a stark reminder of how political parties, driven by ambition, can sometimes bring about the destruction of the very institutions they claim to protect. A lasting legacy. The White House remains a resilient symbol of American democracy, but its history is one of complexity, triumph, and tragedy. From Andrew Jackson's inaugural riot to the political firestorm of Watergate, the White House has weathered both physical and political storms. These moments of destruction have not only altered the course of history, but have also reshaped the way Americans view the office of the president and the political parties that support them. Today, the White House stands as a testament to the resilience of the American government, but also as a reminder of the fragility of power and the risks inherent in unchecked political ambition. The legacy of these moments of destruction has influenced how Americans view the relationship between politics, power, and the preservation of democratic institutions. And that concludes our journey through the fascinating history of when a president's party destroyed the White House, both symbolically and literally. What do you think of these moments of political upheaval? Do you believe the actions of political parties should be more carefully scrutinized? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story captivating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated on our future explorations into history's most intriguing events. Until next time, keep questioning and exploring the past.